Welcome. We are talking politics and religion without killing each other. Without killing. I shouldn't speed through that. We are talking politics and religion, really important subjects, but we're not killing each other. Talking politics and religion without killing each other. I'm your host, Corey Nathan. It's an honor to be a part of the Democracy Group, a network of podcasts that examines what's broken in our democracy and how we can work together to fix it. And I say this all the time, but we have the YouTube channel, we're putting up video and all that stuff. So be sure to subscribe to that. It's really easy to find, youtube.com/@politicsandreligion and all the other stuff too. Follow us, review us. We got the link so that you can, if you haven't left a review, please do. We still have some coming in and could use some more to keep climbing up those lists. It really does help. It really does make a difference in what we're trying to do here, partly so that other folks can find the show and participate in these conversations. It's clear that there's a lot of folks who are feeling drowned out. There's a lot of folks who care about this stuff, but they don't want to participate because all these conversations are dominated by people who are screaming and with strong opinions, and they're afraid to get shot down. And, even if it's just rhetorical and among friends or family, they just don't want to participate because it's the loudest, most obnoxious voices in the room that are taking all the oxygen out of the room. And we're just trying to create a space where we're taking some of that space back. So yeah, it all helps. Like I said, we have links in the show notes to make it all of the links, and stuff, all the places you could find us easy to find. And it all helps so that we can continue having great conversations and exploring real solutions to big problems like the one I wanted to talk about today, which is, as I'm already sort of hinting at, people are increasingly divided. There have been so many studies that have been done about this over the last 10 years now, that people are feeling increasingly polarized, increasingly politicized and divided. And I was listening to a conversation recently between someone who's become a very dear friend of mine and a wonderful scholar. And it occurred to me, there is an antidote to all this. We're trying to participate in the antidote, but there is a number one antidote, which I'm going to tease. I'm going to leave it hanging right there. So that's really what I wanted to talk about today. Like I said, I was listening to a conversation between Liz Joyner, my friend. She is the founder and CEO of an organization called Village Square. Really easy to find, villagesquare.us, villagesquare.us. And she was speaking with a fellow named Bill Maddox of the James Madison Institute. I'll describe a little bit more about their conversation in a second, but I thought it'd be good to sort of define the problem, put meat on them bones a little bit. There's an organization called More in Common. They do these studies about political polarization and partisanship. They've been doing this for a number of years. And there was a very extensive one that was published quite a number, I'm guessing about 4 or 5 years ago now, that many scholars and politicians cite. And it assessed how many of us are really extreme in our views. And it was a lot fewer than you may think. In addition to how folks typically see the other side and whether our understanding of the other side is accurate or not. And it was incredibly accurate. Well, they just published another study. It was an extensive study that concluded basically that division defines the country, but a desire to be united transcends parties. That's how they put it. So More in Common, it was over 2,000 adults. And this particular survey was done just a little over a month ago, so January 2025, very recent study. And just so you know, More in Common is a nonpartisan research, it's a nonprofit that works to understand the forces driving us apart. And they have an explicit agenda to find common ground and bring people together to address challenges that affect us all. So again, division. One of their key findings, there were about 5 altogether, but the one that caught my attention that's apt to this conversation is that division defines the country while a desire to be united transcends parties. And some of the other findings within this subject, they said across political lines, divided is the most commonly chosen word to describe America today. And when you look in the crosstabs, the that was consistent across Democrats, Republicans, and independents. About 60% in Democrats, Republicans, and independents said divided is the most commonly word to describe America today. And then they also emphasized that as they reflect on the future, Americans most desire the country to be united, but don't believe it's a priority for the opposing party if you're a Democrat or a Republican. So the way we see each other is inaccurate, or the way we see each other. Actually, the way we see each other falls into something I've been reading in a couple different places, and I've mentioned this before in interviews that we've done recently, as well as a couple of these types of episodes. There is a political philosopher named Carl Schmitt. Schmitt was a prominent political philosopher in the 1930s in Germany. And he's been cited by David French in a recent piece that he did for the New York Times. He was also cited extensively by Katherine Stewart. We just had Katherine on the show. I was very lucky to have her as she was announcing the launch of her new book, Money, Lies, and God. So I'm just going to quote for you because Katherine describes Schmitt's philosophy better than I could off the cuff. What Katherine said about Carl Schmitt is liberalism, he argued, is a failure because it refuses to acknowledge the distinction between friend and enemy, a distinction that he took to be the foundation of all politics. What makes humans special and genuinely political, according to Schmitt, is that they are willing to fight one another and die for a higher cause. So I, I don't think it's hyperbole to say that very much describes how a lot of folks see these conversations today. A lot of folks enter into political conversations, conversations about religion, and they claim it as an either or proposition, as a friend or enemy, and nowhere in between. And I've seen that too, just in conversations that I've tried to have. In particular, and I'll get to this, this will make sense when I get to the solution. I want to flesh out what exactly the problem is and define it a little bit more. But I've seen this in particular online. So when folks, I'll post something, it's happened a few times here in the last month. I'll post something, say, about something I'm ignorant or naive or something. When I say something along the lines of the violence that occurred on January 6th, 2021 was wrong. I thought that's a baseline. Like, however you see the protests that happened before people stormed the Capitol, before people violently tried to break into the Capitol, before people took fire extinguishers and beat cops with the fire extinguishers, and used bear spray against Capitol Police. I thought that this was something that we could all agree on. The violence that occurred was wrong. Even somebody like me, I disagreed with the premise of why the people who were at the Stop the Steal rally were there, but I strongly believe in their right to peaceably assemble. I strongly believe in their freedom of speech. However much I disagree with the premise of what they were gathering about, however much I disagree with the their assumptions about the validity of the election, they were wrong. Yet they still have the right to peaceably assemble. They have the right to free speech. They have all the rights in the Constitution. In particular, I'm referring to two of the five in the First Amendment. However much I disagree with that, I agree with their First Amendment rights. What I disagree with is once you storm the Capitol to try to disrupt the peaceful transfer of power, that's the part I disagree with. And I certainly disagree. And I think even those who were at the Capitol, many of whom would say the violence was wrong. I thought that that was something we could all agree on. I posted that. I posted something about what Bishop Marion Edgar Buddy said. I didn't think it was particularly extremist for her to ask for mercy. I didn't think, but folks, the point I'm bringing these examples up is that apparently that's not widely agreed upon. That, issues like, violence against police is wrong. I thought that we could all agree on that. I thought that asking for mercy, we could all agree on that. And yet, people that I haven't talked to in 10 years, they pipe up on one of these posts and like, oh, that's so extreme. And oh, you're such a lefty. Oh, you're so Marxist. You're so this, you're so that. And, that's the nature of things, is that you can't cede any ground Even on like, oh, the sky is blue or gravity exists or anything like that. If you see me purely as an enemy and your worldview is increasingly shaped by this friend versus enemy, either or kind of worldview, that's going to continue to drive us apart. So it, we've seen hints of this many times in our own lives and kind of broadly in our culture. Katherine Stewart also brought up how Carl Schmitt, his political philosophy is showing up everywhere, such as Michael Anton. You might remember him. He wrote the now infamous Flight 93 essay in 2016. So I'm going to quote from Katherine's book again, God, Money, Lies, and God. She said the parallels between Carl Schmitt and Claremont Institute, she's referring to Claremont Institute, Michael Anton's intellectual case for Trumpism are clear. In the essay that launched his career as one of Claremont's chief polemicists, Anton essentially claims that we are in a state of emergency. The plane is going to crash. We have friends and foes. Hillary is the enemy right in our faces, but our worst enemies are the internal ones who don't get that we have enemies. So again, I've seen I've seen this play out in my own life, especially online. And we've seen examples of this increasingly at the national level. You know, John Haidt is another scholar that I've come to really respect. I had the honor of speaking with him about a year ago, along with my friend Liz Joyner of Village Square. John was quoted in the Fulcrum almost exactly a year ago. The Fulcrum is funded by the Bridge Alliance Education Fund, and they published an article at the end of February last year. And they were actually talking about a program that I was involved with that was hosted by the Village Square that Liz heads up. They said, according to renowned social psychologist and author Jonathan Haidt, we are scattered by a digital environment into feuding tribes that are governed by mob dynamics and driven by a minority of ideological outliers made stupid at warp speed by groupthink, and thanks to social media, armed with billions of metaphorical dart guns with which to immediately wound the enemy in ways that are hardly only metaphorical. So the um, the bottom line is we're increasingly divided. Social media is exacerbating this. Prominent figures, prominent leaders are exacerbating this. And this isn't necessarily anything new. We're very much repeating a pattern. We can look back at political philosophers who helped to shape this dynamic and articulate this dynamic going back to times in relatively recent history that didn't end so well. That didn't end so well. So where's this all coming from? I mentioned before that I was listening to a conversation between Liz Joyner, again, she's the founder and CEO of Village Square, and Bill Maddox, who is the senior director of the J. Stanley Marshall Center for Education Freedom at the James Madison Institute. And the conversation was on part of their Flying Pig Academy, Flying Pig Academy series. So I love Flying Pig because Liz says, yeah, getting Reds and Blues, Democrats and Republicans, conservatives and liberals together, you can make that happen when pigs fly. Well, she's making pigs fly. I love what she's doing over there. So this conversation that Liz and Bill Maddox were having was part of this Flying Pig Academy series. And it was about location, location, location. The importance of being, I was joking with her, the importance of being earnest. No, the importance of being local. So we define what the problem is, but this is what the solution is. It's about being local. So Liz and Bill were digging into the importance of local community engagement, and they share insights on bridge building efforts at the local level. Liz has been doing this since 2006, and there's any number of other organizations. We've talked about them here. Many of them individuals as well as organizations that are working on this together. And that's really the solution. The solution is getting involved at the local level. The more local, the better. Because what happens is if you're only online, you're only that one comment, you're only that one data point. Whereas if you're local and you're together, now all of a sudden you're human beings with each other, right? We are by nature tactile and storytelling creatures. So when we're divided by these by screens or simply seeing each other's comments after not having spoken to each other, even if you're friends on Facebook or one of the other social media platforms, you're still just this one comment and you haven't thought about this person as a human being in a decade or more, or a year, or however long it's been. But when you're with each other, now all of a sudden you're human beings again, and you have to take account for just even if you are only talking about that one subject, now you have to account for the fact that this is a human being, this is a life, this is a breathing entity in front of you. Now things are all of a sudden different. You can't afford, you can no longer afford the anonymity that digital, social media, what have you, affords you. That's now you're human beings, and you have to treat each other as such. There's something that changes in us when we're with each other, the importance of actually getting together with people. Liz has been very influenced by a great scholar named Robert Putnam, who wrote a book in 2000 called Bowling Alone. And his work is still cited on a regular basis. He was very influential in Jonathan Haidt's work, who I've already cited here. So to this day, Putnam's work from Bowling Alone is regularly cited. So just recently in the Harvard Gazette, they said Putnam argued in Bowling Alone that the glue that holds communities together comes not from formal institutions, but from social ties forged at places like churches, Elks Club meetings, and bowling leagues. This is so true. This is so true because the thing is, when we're with each other, we see each other's humanity. But when we live among each other, we have shared interests. We might think that we disagree on everything, but we have shared interests, having good roads to drive on, having a decent park where our kids can play soccer, perhaps, having clean drinking water, having a fire department that works, right? One way or the other, we have shared interests when we live among each other. So Putnam talks a lot about these civic engagement and social ties, but I think it extends beyond that in terms of our political and community activity. So I think that going to our city council meetings or town council meetings, attending a PTA if your kids are in school, or even if your kids are not in school, or going to a chamber of commerce, joining a chamber of commerce and getting involved in other local business leaders. The community, getting involved at the community level fosters and underscores our shared goals, and our common bonds, if you will. And it's a salve also for loneliness. A lot of what we're seeing, the reactions that we're seeing from folks is, and it's a manifestation of an underlying sense of fear, an underlying sense of anger that a lot of broadcast media and larger scale social media feeds feed into, social media algorithms feed into, prominent podcasts and prominent websites feed into, and this sense of anger and fear drives us apart, causing an epidemic of loneliness. So when we do get involved, whether it's an Elks Club or whether it's a Chamber of Commerce or whether it's participating regularly in our city council meetings or PTA, that ultimately is the salve for loneliness, a salve for loneliness. And it talk about an antidote. It's an antidote for any number of manifestations, any number of symptoms that are part of this larger disease. So my exhortation would be just get together. Just get together. Because then we can start to practice those things that we've been talking about for a while. We can practice asking the kinds of questions that bring someone's humanity out of them, that bring someone, inspire someone to tell their story. When you hear their story, they become more of a human being to you. And they feel like they're heard and they're seen, like what David Brooks talks about. When you ask the kinds of questions that bring the person's story out of themselves, you're doing what Monty Guzman talks about. Instead of it being a contentious, well, you say this and I say that, it becomes two human beings that are connecting. I always love retelling the story of Joe Walsh and Fred Guttenberg, who Joe's been on the show a number of times. Fred and I became friendly earlier last year. Joe is, if you don't remember, Joe's a self-described rabid Second Amendment advocate. And Fred tragically lost his daughter in a terrible school shooting in Florida in 2018. In fact, Fred's daughter was born one day to the day before my son was born, my middle kid, the older of my two boys, and that was in 2003. And she tragically died in that school shooting, in the Parkland school shooting. But Joe and Fred had been invited onto several TV shows, news, cable channels, and they were invited on with the thinking that they were on two very different sides of this very heated issue. And by the second or third time that Joe and Fred were invited onto the same panel, the producers, I guess, expected them to fight it out and have be good TV, if that's what good TV is. But what Fred and Joe discovered is that they ultimately shared a lot of the same values. They shared a lot of the same goals, even. They obviously disagreed very much on the legislation that they thought would get them there. And that's what they were debating and disagreeing about. But in discovering that they shared so many values, so many core values, they ultimately became really dear friends. I was so glad when they came on the program together on this show. And that's ultimately what happens. They're among each other. Instead of being a data point or one of them, they became human beings and ultimately very, very good friends. I have similar examples in my own life. I regularly go to, there's a local bar. It's this dive called Doc's here in town, and I see a couple buddies there, and we're always talking about the tough stuff. We're always talking about politics and religion, but we're talking. It comes up, but we're also talking about sports, and we're talking about business, and we're talking about any number of other things that we have in common, or how much of a dive this place Doc's is. But it's our dive, it's our place. It's where we get together and have a couple beers. I'm not really a beer drinker, you know. But you know what I am? I'm a guy that enjoys getting together with buddies that live, here in town and that I have other things in common with, But if we weren't together, then they would just be this guy who's being some jerk online, this guy who's leaving a comment on one of my posts, and that's it. That's all they are to me. They mean nothing to me. So when we get together, we have a relationship and we're human beings so that when we get to this tough stuff, we can piss each other off. And I love getting my friend so aggravated. He does this thing where he starts talking to, oh my God, how can you say that? He starts talking to the ceiling. And I know, but at the end of the day, he's doing it with a smile underneath in a way, because it's just like, it's just talking among friends, right? And yeah, sometimes it gets heated, but more important than anything else is we're friends. And we believe in each other's basic goodness. And that's not always that's not always granted. That takes time to build up that kind of relationship to see people that way. And it takes work and it takes practice, it takes messing up. And listen, there are people I just don't want to be around. There are people that, you know what? I hate giving up on people, but they've gone to a point where I just can't go there. If someone truly believes that I'm anti-Semitic, anti-Semitic, I grew up going to an Orthodox synagogue, I got family in Israel, that I am anti-Semitic because I didn't vote for Donald freaking Trump, then there's for me, I know what my limits are. There's certain places I can't go anymore. We don't have anything else that we're going to talk about. That's a non-starter for me. So I know, as I say all this, like the number one antidote to toxic partisanship is this is it, is getting together, actually making it local and being with each other and rehumanizing, remembering people that this is what it is. As much as I know that, I know I have my limits. There are certain things, sometimes it's just temporary, like that moron who I graduated high school with. He's still, yeah, to me, he's a moron right now. Hopefully that's a season. Hopefully I'll get over it. Hopefully he'll, have somebody who loves him, who can take some time with him and point out the error of his ways. But yeah, when my pastor's house is burning to the ground, I don't want some freaking moron who's never left the state of New Jersey telling us about LA fire policy and using all these pejoratives to talk about everybody from the governor on down to, every Californian. I don't want to hear it. Save it. Save it. At least save it until the day after. At least save it until the fires aren't still burning. So I know my limitations. So I'm not sitting here completely naive thinking that, everybody can do this. You can do this with everybody. It's always possible. No, I have my limitations too. There are people I'm not going to get the hell away from me for now. Like I've said before, I'm going to love you. I'm going to do my best to love you, but I'm going to love you from far away because if you're around me right now, nothing good's going to happen. Right? So I get it. I have my limitations. But at the end of the day, 99% of the time, if somebody's willing to have a conversation, if somebody's willing to meet me here, or get together via Zoom, at least put Zoom to it so that you can have a conversation and not just be one comment, another comment, and then getting into this little rhetorical grenade throwing thing. It doesn't go anywhere. Nobody's impressed. Nobody's convinced of anything. Building relationships, but the ideal is make it local. It's make it local. Make it local in terms of get together at docks, at the dive in your hometown, or at your coffee shop, or around the soccer field, or at the city council meeting, or at the Elks Club, like what Robert Putnam's been talking about for 25 years now. Get together. Just getting together. That is the number one antidote to toxic partisanship, getting together. And here's the hardest part. The hardest part is putting your shoes on. A coach once told me, the hardest part of going out and working out is putting your shoes on. I've talked a lot about, mental health and seasons of depression. Hardest part is getting your shoes on, getting out. So the hardest part is getting your shoes on about this stuff. Touch base with somebody. And here's the thing. I don't know if it's bad news, but it just is what it is. The bad news, if that's what you want to call it, is that a lot of times somebody's just not going to respond to you because there is toxic partisanship. It exists. So let's say 9 out of 10 times that you invite somebody out to coffee or a beer or an Elks Club or wherever, they're going to say no. But one time they're going to say yes. You're going to get to see somebody as a human being, and they're going to get to see you as a human being and practice some of this stuff, asking them the kinds of questions to learn about their story. And then softening them up so that maybe they want to hear a little bit more about your story. You're not just a data point. You're not just one comment or one position or one line of the voting ballot. You're a human being. And that is the number one antidote to toxic partisanship, just getting together. So again, what's the problem? Problem is toxic partisanship. It's only getting worse. Toxic polarization. It's only getting worse over these years. And I'm telling you, with the elected officials, at least at the national level that we have, that they're not helping to solve this problem. But what it is going to help to solve this problem is getting together, rehumanizing, remembering people instead of dismembering people, remembering people, rehumanizing people, and building those relationships instead of just building that contentious grenade throwing, rhetorical grenade throwing and that sort of thing. So, number one antidote to toxic polarization and toxic partisanship is getting together. So I'm just going to leave it there. Appreciate you joining us today. As always, if you dig what we're doing here, remember to follow this show, write that review. Now you can watch these conversations on YouTube and support us on Patreon. It's youtube.com/@politicsandreligion and patreon.com/politicsandreligion. We have those links in the show notes. Your support really does make a difference, like I said. So thank you for all of it. Now go talk some politics and religion with gentleness and respect, and have a great week.